In Tianjin, the world watched as leaders from Asia, the Middle East, and Eurasia gathered under the banner of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. What might once have been dismissed as a regional forum has now become a stage where Beijing presents itself as the architect of an alternative order. And the timing could not be sharper. Donald Trump battles economic backlash and political turmoil at home, while Washington's allies quietly question its reliability abroad. Against the backdrop, Xi Jinping's message was pointed: unity, trade, integration, hailed a multipolar world, and rejection of unilateral sanctions, and adds calls for a ceasefire in Gaza. And the summit became more than diplomacy. It became a theater of global contest. But can China truly transform the U.S. uncertainty into a durable coalition? Welcome to Think Tank.
Our world is becoming unhinged.
At the Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit in Tianjin, the Chinese leader Xi Jinping urged member states, including Russia, Iran, and India, to integrate their economies and build an orderly, multipolar world, implicitly criticizing the U.S. policies under President Trump. According to the Washington Post, Xi called for opposing power politics and deepening cooperation through initiatives such as a proposed SCO development bank. The summit highlighted China's push to position itself as a reliable partner and counterbalance U.S. dominance in global governance. Despite internal divisions, the SCO members, united by dissatisfaction with the U.S., shared the platform to signal global influence. The meeting also showcased diplomatic engagements, including Xi's talks with Modi and Putin, amid ongoing geopolitical tensions and efforts to expand the organization's role and membership.
In Tianjin, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit this week became more than a routine diplomatic gathering. It was China's attempt to turn turbulence in Washington into an opportunity to reshape the global order. Hosting 20 leaders, including Russia's Vladimir Putin and India's Narendra Modi, President Xi Jinping called for integration, not decoupling, and urged nations to resist what he termed the West's unilateral course of measures. The summit's statement, dubbed the Tianjin Declaration, pressed for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, while underscoring the need for a multilateral trade system that shields developing economies from punitive tariffs. The message was unmistakable. China aims to transform the organization from a loose Eurasian forum into a platform for challenging U.S. dominance. The timing was deliberate. In the United States, President Donald Trump faces mounting legal and political challenges, alongside backlash from his sweeping 50% tariffs on Indian imports. That disarray, analysts argue, offered Beijing space to present itself as a steady alternative. With the Shanghai Cooperation Organization's discussions for a new development bank underway, analysts view this as an embryonic alternative to Western-led institutions like the IMF and World Bank, echoing the logic between China's Belt and Road Initiative. With the organization's membership expanding to 27 states, including new entrants from the Caucasus and Southeast Asia, the bloc now represents nearly half of humanity. Whether the Shanghai Cooperation Organization can sustain this unity beyond rhetoric remains uncertain. But in Tianjin, As Trump's America wobbled, Beijing projected itself as the anchor of a new multipolar vision.
And to unpack these pressing questions, we are joined by two distinguished analysts. Joining us from Hong Kong is Mr. Marvin Lee, a geopolitical analyst and specializing in Asia-Pacific affairs. And from Washington, we have Mr. Justin Thomas Russell, a Global Foreign Policy Center Executive Director focusing on the U.S. foreign policy and international relations. Welcome, gentlemen, and thank you so much for joining me here today at Think Tank. I will start off with Mr. Lee. Mr. Lee, how significant is the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit in Tianjin as a milestone for Beijing's global strategy? If you can share this with us, please.
Assalamu alaikum, ahlan wa sahlan. This summit is a step change rather than a routine call among all national leaders. Beijing used home field advantage to align security, finance, technology, and narrative. And there are three concrete moves stand out. First, China tabled the SCO development, bank proposal, and pledged new credit lines, which shift from the forum from security talk towards resource mobilization. And second, China opened access to Beidou service for SCO members, a system played to reduce reliance on US-controlled GPS systems and its technology. And the third point is the leaders adopt a broad outcome package, including the Tianjin Declaration and a longer horizon development strategy, which gives a bureaucracy a followable plan. In Chinese terms, we call this to build the waterworks and the channels reforms. And these optics were also carefully structured with President Xi, President Putin, and Modi recently engaged, signaling that the platform remains one of the few tables where these leaders contribute and communicate with each other to deal with all this ongoing chaos in international relations.
Mr. Russell, if you can share with us and talk to us a little bit about the U.S. reaction to China's overtures via the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit.
Well, I think the foreign affairs team in Washington, the Trump administration and State Department are quite frankly still trying to dissect what is exactly happening. What we're seeing is, what was once thought to be a close regional ally in President Modi and India is now holding hands with Vladimir Putin as they walk in to embrace President Xi of China. This is a very disturbing and should be very problematic for Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, the State Department, as well as the White House. You're talking about now an additional layer of cooperation between Russia, India, China, the three major economic players in the region, on top of the BRICS alliance. And now you're adding the SCO involved. It's a very troubling situation, and it just shows the diminishing influence and power that the U.S. has abroad.
Mr. Lee, how do the pledged $1.4 billion in the new Shanghai Cooperation Organization loans compare to China's broader Belt and Road investments?
This is a very good question. Measured against Belt and Road Initiative flows, $1.4 billion over 3 years is a very small, insignificant numbers, but it is a very symbolic one. The Belt and Road Initiative launched an estimated $16.2 billion in construction contract and $57.1 billion in investment in the first half of 2025 alone, a record half year. So this Belt and Road Initiative and its engagement since 2013 is around 1.17 trillion to over $1.2 trillion, depending on the methodology. And framed this way, the SCO envelope is seen as a capital means to call in co-financing, standardized project pipelines, and test local currency instruments before scaling. Think of it as priming a pump rather than funding the entire canal. So we call this to work with the trend and guide it in the long future.
Okay, Mr. Russell, how does Trump's domestic turmoil, whether politically and legally, do you think shape China's opportunity to push its narrative internationally?
That's a great question. And quite frankly, President Xi is not an idiot. Look, President Xi has always felt that they have always been kind of the second chair as far as the great economic powers of the globe, especially in this growing interconnected global economy that we're living in. Trump coming in, I mean, President Xi is taking advantage of the fact that Trump has made our allies and our financial trading partners, our closest trading partners, very, very angry through these overwhelming tariffs that they've put that are unjustified, quite frankly, and unwarranted. And all that's doing is driving the allies, the economic allies that we have, into the arms of China and BRICS and the SCO, and that's giving rise to Mr. Lee's point. That's giving rise to the success and the alternative financing that Belt and Road program provides. You look at Belt and Road and the success of Belt and Road in Africa. Basically the U.S. has become secondary or tertiary economically in Africa, because of our lack of understanding, our lack of invoking the Baker Doctrine of using economic trade and development as a diplomatic tool. And we're seeing now it become even more critical as we see the SCO gain a foothold and we see BRICS continuing to provide an alternative. The idea that they're not going to create a bank is even more troubling.
Actually, that's my next question to Mr. Lee. What does the creation of the prospective Shanghai Cooperation Organization Development Bank mean for the financial architecture compared to the Western institutions, maybe like the IMF or the World Bank, do you think, Mr. Lee?
So from my own perspective and from the Chinese perspective,
yes,
if you want to get any loans from the Western banks or institutions like IMF, right? So they will ask you to have an economic reform, a political reform, which means to intervene the internal politics, which the Chinese government does not want to deal with this. So an SEO bank would complement, not immediately displace institutions like AIIB, Asian Investment Bank, and the BRICS New Development Bank. The likely new term differentiator is local currency lending and settlement among a group that trades heavily in energy, metals, and logistics, and that reduce dollar funding risk, insulate projects from sanctions, spillovers, and create a testbed for payments connectivity. And over time, in the long future, if the bank ties its loans to share technical standards, data exchange, and green energy platforms announced at Tianjin, that becomes a plumbing of what Asian announced at the Tianjin, and that be like the Chinese principle here, which means to stabilize the foundation first and then expand. And from the Chinese perspective, if everyone uses these banks, which means they have to follow the China standard, not the American standard, not the UK standard anymore.
Mr. Russell, and what do you think? What's the American policymakers' view regarding the SCO Development Bank? Could it be a credible threat or maybe just a soft counterweight tactic, do you think?
Look, it's another tool in the Chinese toolbox to try and gain economic control over the rest of the globe. That has been Xi's motive forever. The one thing I want to point out, though, is while Mr. Lee's point of this is a great opportunity for the rest of the world to have an alternative to the US and the UK standard, the one thing we got to point out is the dangers of dealing with China as a key financial partner. We look in Africa, as much as we've seen China grow in its economic influence on the continent, we've also seen it put a chokehold on the different governments that they have worked with. We give you examples of China investing in new highways. They create these funding blocks for infrastructure. And then once the infrastructure is completed, the Chinese government goes back to the central government of the country that took the loan and said, hey, by the way, this is now due. Well, we can't pay that right now. They then take control and then they put additional standards. This is predatory lending. That is a historical proven fact of the Belt and Road program, and it's a proven fact of their continued try for economic dominance globally. Although I think that Washington does need to be concerned, and I am the first one to tell everybody that will listen, we cannot fall asleep at the wheel on this. This is a legitimate threat to U.S. economic influence and economic cooperation with our partners. Mm-hmm. We also have to point out the fact that China has a history of not being the fairest or the nicest financial partner when you go into, especially in these larger infrastructure. The greatest example I can give most recently is
Mr. Russell. Mr. Russell, who is the kindest or most fairest, actually, if China? Do you think it's not? I mean, who would you think would be fairer or actually?
I think. No. I understand the question. I think it's a very good and it's a very fair question. Look, I'm going to be biased. I'm going to say, look, the Western partners have always been the fairest partners, even with even if we take away the IMF, even if we take away the World Bank, we have, you take away those. If you take away those, you still have other development banks like the IDB, the International Development Bank, which has done great things in all hemispheres of the globe. Those are fair and equal partners that do not put predatory conditions on the lending or their economic cooperation.
And how's the Chinese bank, the AIIB as well? How's that in the equation?
Again, anytime you talk about the AIIB, anytime you talk about any of the Chinese lending programs as part of their international diplomatic toolbox, it then becomes predatory. It is the bait and switch. It is the less than quality. And then there's no local content. You look at any major economic partnership that China has done recently with Belt and Road, what we see is they don't use local labor, so there's no boost to the local economy. There's no local content that's used. It's all Chinese labor that's imported. It's Chinese equipment that is used, and it's Chinese materials used to make the builds. That does not help the countries that they're doing these projects in, especially when they are considered, and I use air quote, partners in the project.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Lee, what do you think about Mr. Russell's, what he was saying about the Unified Shanghai Cooperation Organization members as opposed to the U.S.-led order, the bank? Is it unity in grievance, or as analysts have probably analysts have actually noted that?
This is a real alignment.
Do you agree with what he's saying?
I have my own opinion here, so let me address his opinion first. So like he has mentioned that China's Belt and Road Initiative that never hired the local workers here. So bear in mind that most of them are from the third world countries. They are very underdeveloped. So how can the Chinese companies and government, the SEO, hire the local workers to build such a very complicated infrastructures like highway, like dams, airport, 5G communications networks here? So that there is a foreign minister of Kenya or president of Kenya once told to the world that when the British came, they give them a lecture. When the Chinese came, they give them a railway, airport, and everything. I just been to Saudi Arabia 1 month ago. I spoke to the local people. I asked them, how do you think about American and how do you think about Chinese? And they think about and they said that the Chinese come here, they will bring prosperity, business, everything all together, and then to build to build road first, and then to make business later. So from the perspective, from the Saudi perspective, from the Arab perspective, they believe the Chinese come here and to do business with them, and they said the Chinese only ask 3 questions: how much, how many, and when. But the American, the British They will ask you lots of difficult questions related to all sorts of complicated questions. But they also have this problem in the Western world. But I'm here to address this. I'm not here just to confront between Chinese world or the Western world, because the Chinese civilizations love peace. So that's why we have SCO to protect ourselves. And there's a military parade tomorrow just to defend ourselves. So we are ready to talk, but we are ready to fight at the same time.
Okay, Mr. Russell, moving on to another point, how might China's $280 million aid pledge and the $1.4 billion in loans influence the SCO member states' allegiance?
Well, you got to look at who the member states are. I mean, to member states such as Turkmenistan, Mongolia, Uzbekistan, yeah, that's going to mean a lot of money. But when you start talking about India, Russia, Turkey, Indonesia, Malaysia, these are regional economic powers that don't really need the money. What they're looking at is the alliance that it creates for them. What they're looking at is an alternative. Look, Donald Trump has shown his desire for isolationism. He's put forward this America first, and that doesn't sit well with a lot of our regional partners, such as the major economic partners regionally that I just mentioned. Yeah. As a result, now what they see is in the SCO and the pledge of the money, it's not about the money, it's about the trade, the long-term relationship, the fair trade that they're not going to haggle over this and get punitive tariffs put on them by a America First isolationist president. They're going to look for global trading partners in a global economy that we're in.
Mr. Lee, can you share with us what are the implications of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization expanding to 27 states, including Laos, Azerbaijan, and Armenia?
This is a very good question, especially mentioning these three questions. There are one common perspective here from the Chinese perspective. Okay. They are small countries, but they are located at a very important geographical locations. So first in Laos, the relationship between Laos and China is very good, and there is a new built railway between China and Laos. And Azerbaijan and Armenia, there have been lots of conflict in recent years near the Caucasus Mountains. So that when these three countries join together, they have the platform, sit together and negotiate to make a peace talk together just to de-escalate the tensions. And Laos is quite an undeveloped country at this moment, but because of the borders, they have lots of uncertainty about the borders. So that's why the involvement of the big countries like Russian, Chinese, India, they can help together and to de-escalate the tensions and make prosperity. But at the same time, SCO has its own uncertainty here. For example, the relationship between India and China is quite unstable. And you can see that the Indian, the Chinese and Russian, they spoke together like a friend, like a close friend, just to give a message to the American, to the Western world that you push us away, and then we will form another group, and then we will make another deal together as a bargaining chip to negotiate against the United States because of the recent tariff. So that's what the involvement of Laos, Azerbaijan and Armenia. Yes. So it's not a small move from my perspective. It is a big move for the future.
Okay. Mr. Russell, what do you think Washington is concerned about the SCO's rhetoric? Maybe could destabilize existing alliances like the NATO, for example?
I think other than Donald Trump and maybe Marco Rubio and Vice President J.D. Vance, I think everybody is concerned about this. I think the rhetoric, let me say the lack of rhetoric. Mm-hmm. It is not a war of words between Washington and Beijing or Washington and Delhi. It is actually a one-way street of war of words from Washington, and it's being met by Moscow, Beijing, and Delhi just kind of looking, shrugging their hands and said, fine, we're going to deal with things over here. We're going to continue doing business. We're going to continue to find alternatives to America being the great trading partner or the desired trading partner, and that is what is causing a lot of heartburn in D.C. One of the things we also have to look at is the fact that historically, anytime that this has happened, anytime that the U.S. has gone isolationist, America first, whatever you want to call it, it ends up being not only detrimental to U.S. policy, it ends up causing great conflict globally. We looked at it in World War I, World War II. We see what happened economically. One could argue that the Great Depression of 1929 to 1932 happened as a result of the isolationism put in by Herbert Hoover and going into FDR, who had to fix it. We're seeing it again. History is bound to repeat itself again, and this is what's happening. And the winners of this are going to be the BRICS Alliance, the SCO, and their development banks and their economic partnerships.
Okay, Mr. Lee, how does emphasizing a multilateral trade system and rejecting the unilateral coercive measures position China globally, especially with the Gaza ceasefire appeal?
The Chinese government is presenting itself as a custodian of process, not just power. The Tianjin Declaration language opposing unilateral, like a single coercive measures, situates the group as defender of World Trade Organization style rules, and coupling with a call for an immediate and lasting ceasefire in Gaza and humanitarian access aligned with the platform with broad global South sentiments in conflict, law, and relief. So in Chinese idioms, we call this virtue is never alone, it always has neighbors. So that's why this framing helps China claiming moral ground even as it pursues interest-based project here. And from my perspective, I would like to see a world peace, especially in Gaza, one day.
Mr. Russell, could the Shanghai Cooperation Organization's emphasis on multilateral trade resonate with countries frustrated by U.S. unilateralism?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Look, with the leaders and the heads of state that I've spoken to over the past 3 to 4 years, post-Trump first term and now into Trump's second term, every one of them has said the same thing. We want to be a key trading partner with the United States. We want to do a lot of our trade with America. The problem is you make it so difficult for us to do trade and to be a trusted economic power for us. So what do? We have to look at our own internal economy, and we're going to trade whoever makes it easiest and gives us the best deal. If it's not America, well, in this case, it might be China, it might be the BRICS Alliance, it might be the SCO. But make no mistake about it, is the true desired partner is still the United States, at least for now. But if things keep going the way it is, if the Trump policies keep getting invoked and the Trump foreign policy keeps being deployed the way it is over the next 2.5 years, that may not be the case. We may want to be everybody's trusted partner, but we're losing ground in that argument.
Mr. Lee,
yes.
How far can the SCO realistically evolve from a talk shop into an effective counterweight to the U.S. dominance, do you think?
The SCO will not become a military alliance because there is a huge involvement of the Chinese government here.
Okay.
Its path to weight is to cooperate, not to shock the world. And there are 3 points here. First, financialization. If the new bank launched with critical governance, transparent pipelines and local currency facilitates that members actually use. And second, all about the standard, from energy and digital platforms to satellite navigation like Beidou access that reduce switching costs inside the bloc. And the third point is a steady security cooperation against cross-border climate and even terrorism in anywhere else in the world. So basically, from the Chinese perspective and our the art of war says, we never confront with our opponent directly. So we have our own development path, and in order to challenge the existing global power, with different flexible approach, with very new approach comprehensively, from satellite to soft power, from hard power to sharp power.
And that was Mr. Marvin Lee, a geopolitical analyst specializing in Asia-Pacific affairs. And also with us was Mr. Justin Thomas Russell, a Global Foreign Policy Center Executive Director. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for sharing your insights and helping us navigate these complex international developments. And with that, that brings us to the end of today's episode of Think Tank, which always unveils the complexities of our changing world. Thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for more updates on Qnews.